You don't know what silence is until you've heard the quiet of a place you cannot leave. They called it Harborview Haven, a pretty name for a pretty cage. My daughter, Caroline, said it was such practiced cheer when they brought me here 6 weeks ago. "You'll love Harborview, Mom. Look at the gardens and the activities." My son David nodded along, his hand tight on my elbow as if I might bolt. "It's for your safety," he'd said, the same phrase he'd used when he took my car keys 2 months prior. Safety. It's the word adult children use when they mean convenience. I am 79 years old. My name is Eleanor Vance. I have arthritis in my right knee, and I sometimes forget where I put my reading glasses. I do not have dementia. I balanced the household books for 40 years. I filed my own taxes until last April. But to them, I had become a problem to be solved, a liability. After Robert, my husband, died 2 years ago, the space I occupied in their lives seemed to shrink from a home to a holding cell. The room they gave me is pleasant. Cream walls, a floral curtain, a window that looks onto a courtyard with a burbling fountain that never stops. It's the sound of forced tranquility. I brought 1 suitcase. David said they'd bring the rest later. The rest. My life, distilled into a 3-bedroom cottage on Magnolia Lane, into gardens I planted with Robert, into shelves of books and photo albums and the hum of my own refrigerator. The first week I was polite. I attended the welcome circle. I smiled at the activities director, a young man named Kyle who speaks in exclamation points. I let them think I was settling in because I believed them. I believed this was temporary, a period of assessment. A mother's faith in her children is a stubborn, tenacious weed. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. Caroline visited, bringing a bag from my house, a few things to make it cozy. Inside was a throw pillow from my couch, a cheap replica of my grandmother's vase, not the real one, and a stack of my mystery novels, the ones with broken spines she'd always called clutter. "Where's the blue quilt?" I asked. "The one from the trunk at the foot of my bed." "Oh, that old thing." Caroline brushed invisible lint from her sleek trousers. "It was so worn, Mom. We'll get you a nice new one." A cold thread of unease slipped down my spine. That quilt was handmade by my mother. Worn was the point. Its thin patches held the scent of childhood, of sick-bed comforts, of Robert's shivers during his last winter. It wasn't hers to deem old. Later that week, I called David. "I'd like to come home for an afternoon, just to water the plants, check the mail." A long pause. "The mail's being forwarded, Mom, and we hired a service for the yard. No need for you to trouble yourself." "It's no trouble. It's my house." "Of course it is," he said, his voice adopting that smooth, placating tone I'd come to dread. The betrayal didn't roar. It whispered. It was in the way Caroline stopped asking what I wanted and started telling me what I needed. It was in David's new habit of talking about my finances in the third person, as if I were not in the room. "We'll have to see what Mom's assets can support long term," he'd say to the nursing home administrator, Mr. Jenkins, while I sat right there. But the moment the world tilted off its axis came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was in the common area, pretending to do a puzzle. 2 of the maintenance staff, a man and a woman in gray uniforms, were moving a new television into the lounge. They were young, talking without care for the old ears around them. "Long day," the woman sighed, wiping her forehead. "Second job after my shift. Helped my cousin move a whole dining set out of some old lady's house over on the west side. Beautiful solid oak. Heavy as sin." "Nice score?" the man grunted, adjusting his grip on the TV.
Yeah, the family was just letting it go. Said the mom was in a home and wouldn't need it. We loaded up the china cabinet, too. Real crystal in there. My cousin's gonna flip it. My breath hitched. West Side? Magnolia Lane was on the west side. The woman continued, oblivious to the old woman freezing 10 feet away. Kinda sad, though. The neighbor came out, asked if we were family. The guy I was with, he just said, yeah, clearing it out for our aunt. Neighbor looked, I don't know, pissed. Said the old lady loved that china cabinet. The man chuckled. Not her problem anymore. The blood drained from my face, leaving a ringing cold in my ears. My china cabinet. Robert and I bought it in Savannah on our 10th anniversary. We'd saved for a year. Every piece of crystal inside was a story. A wedding gift, an anniversary, a birth. I could see it, clear as day, in the dining room of my empty, echoing cottage. And a stranger was telling me it was gone? I stood up, the puzzle pieces scattering at my feet. The 2 workers glanced over. I must have looked like a ghost. I turned and walked, 1 foot in front of the other, back to my cream-colored room. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. It wasn't proof. Not yet. It was a rumor, a haunting, but a mother knows. In the deep, cellular way you know a child's cry in the night, I knew this was truth. They weren't just storing my life. They were liquidating it. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, and for the first time, I allowed myself to see the past months not through the fog of grief and assumed good intentions, but with a brutal, clear-eyed clarity. The quick sale of my car, which David handled because the paperwork was confusing. Caroline tidying up the house and coming back with my jewelry box, saying she'd get the good pieces appraised for insurance. The repeated postponements of my trips home. The new, vague lock on the conversation whenever I asked about the house's taxes or upkeep. Piece by terrible piece, the mosaic revealed itself. Not care, but conquest. My independence wasn't fading. It was being carefully, surgically removed. The next morning, I looked at my reflection in the small bathroom mirror. Eleanor Vance, mother, widow, former librarian, current resident of room 12, and perhaps a fool. But a fool can learn. A fool can watch, and a fool, when cornered, can become something entirely else. I made a decision then. As the first light of dawn painted the courtyard fountain in pale gold, I would stop being their mother for a moment. I would start being a detective. I would be quiet. I would be still. I would be the harmless old woman they believed me to be. And I would find out exactly what my children were doing in the house on Magnolia Lane. For the first time in my life, I was grateful for my invisibility. They thought they had put me on a shelf. They didn't realize they had just given me the perfect place to watch.
The heart has its own memory, a deeper archive than the mind. In the silent stretches of my days at Harborview, I began to take inventory, not of this room, but of the home they were stealing from me. I'd close my eyes and walk, in perfect detail, through the cottage on Magnolia Lane. I started in the attic, the cedar chest holding my wedding dress, yellowed with time, but still smelling of hope. Robert's army footlocker, the one he never let me sort through. The boxes of children's artwork, David's lopsided clay pots, Caroline's finger paintings of furious purple suns. I moved down to the spare room, the walnut rocking chair where I'd nursed them both, the shelves of childhood books, Goodnight Moon, The Cricket in Times Square. The living room, Robert's leather armchair, its left arm worn smooth by his hand. My writing desk, the one with the secret compartment where I kept my mother's pearls and our important papers. Room by room, memory by memory, I rebuilt my home in the palace of my mind. It was my fortress, and I was its only remaining guard. To gather real proof, I needed eyes outside these walls. My first ally came from an unexpected place, the Harbor View laundry room. I'd taken to folding my own clothes, a small act of defiance against the institutional efficiency. There, I met Lena. Lena is 84, with a spine curved like a question mark and eyes sharp as needles. She'd been a corporate secretary for a powerful law firm for 40 years. She was here not because her mind was gone, but because her body had betrayed her with Parkinson's. Her family, she told me over the gentle hum of dryers, lived across the country and sent lavish gift baskets, but never visits. They pay for the premium package, she said dryly. Guilt comes with extra pudding. One afternoon, as we folded sheets, I took a breath and stepped off the cliff. Lena, if you wanted to find out if someone was selling your belongings without your permission, how would you do it? She didn't miss a beat, her gnarled hands smoothing a perfect corner. You'd need documentation, photographs, a dated inventory. Then you'd need to trace the items. Check online resale sites, local antique dealers, auction houses. She looked at me, her gaze stripping away all pretense. The children? I nodded, the simple admission feeling both terrifying and liberating. Mine just ignore me. Yours are thieves. It's a distinction without much difference in the end. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a sleek, tiny smartphone. My great-nephew thinks I can't use this. I've beaten him at online chess 3 months this month. A week later, Lena and I sat in her room, the door closed. On her phone, she navigated to a popular online marketplace. Her fingers, though trembling slightly, were precise. Now, she said, what would they sell first? Something valuable, but not so unique it will be noticed from a house that's supposed to be occupied. The silver. Robert's parents' sterling silver flatware service. 8 settings. We never used it, but I polished it twice a year. Lena typed. We scrolled, and there it was. Not all of it. 4 settings. Listed by a seller named Classic Revivals. The description, estate sterling, excellent condition. The photograph was taken on a dark wood table. My kitchen table. The world narrowed to that image. The familiar grain of the wood, a faint watermark from a glass I'd left there years ago. My silver. On my table. Sold by my children. A sound escaped me, a soft gasp of pure pain. Lena's hand closed over mine. She squeezed. Breathe, Eleanor. This is evidence. Pain is data now. Remember that. Data. We collected more. Lena taught me to search for specific items. My Limoges porcelain vase, a birthday gift from Robert for my 50th, listed. The vintage Singer sewing machine that had been my grandmother's, listed. Each discovery was a fresh puncture wound, but I let the pain fuel a cold, focused fury. My other ally was Ben, the weekday evening security guard. A quiet man in his 60s, a veteran. He often saw me sitting in the lobby, staring out at the parking lot. One night he brought me a cup of terrible vending machine cocoa. You always look like you're waiting for someone, Mrs. Vance. I'm waiting for the version of my life that makes sense, Ben. He nodded, as if I'd said something perfectly reasonable. The nights are long for that.
In careful fragments, I told him. Not the plan, but the crime. He listened, his face impassive. When I finished, he said, "My sister's son did the same, cleared out her life before the funeral flowers wilted." He sipped his coffee. I get off at 11. My drive home takes me past Magnolia Lane. I don't mind taking a slow roll past number 214. And so the network formed. Lena, the intelligence, Ben, reconnaissance, and me, the wounded general. Then's reports were delivered in low murmurs by the fountain. Saw then there Tuesday night, Bella's antique refinishing. Real estate sign went up in the yard yesterday afternoon. For sale, owner motivated. Each piece of data was a stone in the wall between me and the people I raised. The hardest nights were the ones filled not with anger, but with grief for the past. I'd lie awake, ambushed by memories. David, age 7, presenting me with a dandelion bouquet, his face radiant. Caroline, 15, sobbing on my bed after her first heartbreak as I stroked her hair. Where did those children go? Were they always just seeds waiting to grow into these strangers? Or did I water some hidden selfishness in them? The questions had no answers, only echoes. I realized they weren't just stealing my things, they were erasing me, dismantling the physical proof of my life, my loves, my legacy. The silver would melt, the china would break. The house would belong to another family who would paint over the pencil marks on the kitchen doorframe that charted my children's growth. I was being disappeared while my heart still beat. One afternoon, Lena found the ultimate proof. It wasn't an item for sale. It was a document. She'd used a people search site she still had access to from her old job. She pulled up a recently filed form with the county records office, a notice of trustee sale for 214 Magnolia Lane. The trustee listed was David Vance as attorney in fact for Eleanor Vance. They weren't just planning to sell my house. They had already begun the legal process. Using the power of attorney I'd signed after Robert's death when I was drowning in grief and trusted my son to throw me a lifeline, he was instead using it to sign away my home. I stared at the screen, the legal jargon blurring. This was no longer about crystal or silver. This was about the ground beneath my feet, the last tangible piece of my life with Robert. Lena looked at me. What now, Eleanor? For weeks, I had been collecting data, nursing a secret hurt. But this required war. I thought of the secret compartment in my writing desk, the one David and Caroline never knew about. Inside, along with the pearls, was a small fireproof lockbox. And inside that box was the one thing my overconfident children had overlooked: the original notarized copy of my last will and testament, drafted by a fierce old lawyer named Arthur Grossman 5 years ago. And Arthur Grossman's card. My will named David and Caroline as executors, but it also contained a powerful ironclad clause that said, if any beneficiary contests this will or is found to have misappropriated, stolen, or sold any property of testator prior to her death, that beneficiary shall be deemed to have predeceased the testator, and their share shall be distributed equally among the remaining beneficiaries or to the charitable trust herein established. They had triggered their own disinheritance. I looked at Lena, a new steely calm settling in my veins. Now, I said, my voice unfamiliar in its certainty, I make a phone call. I had spent a lifetime building a home and a family. Now I would use the last of my strength to build a case, and I would pray that the law had a longer memory than my children's conscience. Arthur Grossman's voice on the phone was a rasp of pure gravel, unchanged by the years. Eleanor Vance, I was wondering if I'd hear from you before they planted you. No platitudes. It was why I'd hired him. They're selling my house out from under me, Arthur, and everything in it. A long, crackling silence. The children, the very same. Proof.
photographs, online listings, a security guard who's seen the moving vans. Email it. Don't use the home's Wi-Fi. Find a public library. I'll be in your county tomorrow. Don't say a word to anyone. The next day during gardening club, I told Kyle I had a dentist appointment. Ben, off duty, picked me up in his old, nondescript sedan. We drove to the library. I used the computer terminal, my heart hammering as I sent Lena's collected evidence to Arthur. The act felt monumental, a silent declaration of war launched from a public desk. Arthur arrived at Harborview the following afternoon, posing as my cousin from Toledo. He was 85, stooped but unbent, with eyes that missed nothing. We sat in the stifling family visitation room. He spread printouts on the plastic table. It's worse than you thought, Eleanor. They've not only initiated the sale, they've taken a bridge loan against the equity, citing home modification for elder care. The money is sitting in a joint account with your son. They've spent a quarter of it already. The numbers swam before my eyes. My home's equity converted into a new patio for David's house? A luxury cruise for Caroline? The violation was so profound it felt numb. What do I do? The question was a whisper. Arthur's eyes gleamed. We scorch the earth. First, I file an emergency motion to revoke the power of attorney, citing fraud and financial abuse. We freeze all accounts, halt the house sale, then we sue for conversion, theft essentially, for every item sold. We demand punitive damages, and we use the clause in your will. We cut them out, cleanly, legally, and forever. The finality of it stole my breath. To legally sever my children, it was the nuclear option. Is there another way? To get it all back? No. To make them stop? Possibly. A settlement where they return the remaining money, cease all sales, and sign the house back to you. But Eleanor, he leaned forward, his voice softening a fraction, they have shown you who they are. Do you want to spend whatever time you have left negotiating with people who saw you not as a mother, but as an inventory?
He was right. The mother in me wanted to find a reason, an excuse, a scrap of the children I loved. But the woman I was now, the one who had silently cataloged her own dismantling, knew that woman was gone. She had died in this pretty room, replaced by someone harder, sadder, and infinitely more clear-sighted. Scorch the earth, I said. The legal machinery, once Arthur engaged it, moved with startling speed. Injunctions were filed. The for sale sign on Magnolia Lane was replaced with a stark notice of lis pendens. Bank accounts were frozen. David and Caroline were served papers at their homes and workplaces. Their reaction was not remorse, but rage. They descended on Harborview together, a united front of fury. It was the most coordinated I'd seen them in years. Mr. Jenkins, flustered, showed them into the administrator's office where Arthur and I waited. David's face was purple. "What is this, Mom? This is insane. How could you do this to us?" Caroline was crying, but her eyes were dry and sharp. "After all we've done for you, the care we've provided, we were managing her assets because you couldn't." I looked at them, these middle-aged strangers wearing my children's faces. The love I felt was a phantom limb, aching for something that was no longer there. "You were stealing from me," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the small room. "You sold my mother's quilt. You sold the silver your father's parents saved for. You were selling the house where you grew up." "It's just stuff," David exploded. "And the house is a drain. This is about your safety, about being practical." "No," Arthur interjected, his voice a calm blade. "This is about felony theft and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The district attorney is reviewing the file as we speak. You can speak to Eleanor about a settlement that avoids jail time, or you can speak to your own attorneys about the criminal trial. I suggest the former." The word jail cut through their anger like a guillotine. The color drained from David's face. Caroline's performative tears stopped instantly. What followed was not a conversation, but a negotiation.
Arthur laid out the terms. Every remaining cent from the loan returned. A full, notarized inventory of every item sold with the proceeds returned. The power of attorney destroyed in front of a notary. The deed to the house signed back to me irrevocably, and their removal as executors and beneficiaries from my will. They signed. They signed every paper Arthur put in front of them, their hands trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. They didn't look at me. When it was over, they left without a word. The last sound I heard from my son was the slam of the car door. In the sudden quiet of the office, a profound exhaustion washed over me. I had won. I had reclaimed my house, my legacy, my autonomy, and I never felt more bereft. The following months were a time of quiet reclamation. With the returned money, I hired a live-in aide, a warm, no-nonsense woman named Maria who treated me like a person, not a patient. I moved back to Magnolia Lane. The house felt hollow, echoes of what was gone, but it was mine. I didn't refill the spaces. I let them breathe. I gave some of the recovered money, along with a portion of my savings, to establish the Robert Vance Respite Fund, providing grants to family caregivers who needed a break, a small rebellion against the kind of care I'd received. Lena and I talk every day. Ben comes for dinner every Sunday. Maria's granddaughter, a bubbly art student, comes and paints with me in the afternoons. We are a patchwork family, stitched together not by obligation, but by chosen loyalty. As for David and Caroline, they are gone. The legal silence is absolute. I hear through the grapevine that Caroline's marriage frayed under the stress of the scandal. David was passed over for a promotion. I feel a distant pang for their pain, the way one might for characters in a sad play. But the connection is severed. The cord is cut. One evening, as I sat on my porch swing, the one piece of furniture they'd left, too weather-worn to sell, watching the magnolia buds swell, I realized something. The fear of being forgotten had been my constant companion since Robert died, but my children hadn't forgotten me. They had remembered me only as an asset. In trying to erase me, they had forced me to inscribe my own name boldly and finally on the deed of my life. I am Eleanor Vance. I am not a mother anymore, not in any way that matters. I am a woman who tends her garden, who laughs with her friends, who sleeps in her own bed. The past is a house of ghosts, but I am no longer one of them. I am finally haunting my own life. And the quiet here on Magnolia Lane isn't the silence of abandonment. It's the sound of my own peace, deep and resonant and completely, finally my own.